You sold the house. Behind my back. Emily crossed her arms, her face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Her voice shook with the weight of betrayal. She stood in the middle of our living room, the place that once was a sanctuary of laughter and memories, but now felt more like a battlefield. Mom and Dad were seated at the kitchen table, exchanging nervous glances as they tried to avoid eye contact with Emily. Emily, it's not what you think, Hannah began, her voice steady but tinged with regret. She was my older sister, always the responsible one, or so it seemed. I had to do it. The house was falling apart and the market was high. You know we couldn't afford the repairs. Emily's voice rose, sharp as glass. The house was our legacy. Mom and Dad, they didn't sell it, Hannah. You did. Without telling anyone. Without asking me. She looked to Mom, then Dad, searching for some support, but they both remained silent, their faces etched with years of guilt. I stood in the doorway watching as this family drama unfolded before me, heart pounding. I was James, 28 years old, the youngest of the 3 siblings. The quiet one, the one who had always tried to keep the peace. But today that peace felt like a distant memory, lost in the wake of Hannah's betrayal. I hadn't spoken up yet. I hadn't even been able to process the full depth of what was happening. This house, our childhood home, had been sold without my consent. Without any of us being consulted. And now, here we were, Hannah trying to justify it while the rest of us stood in stunned silence. My mind raced back to all the times I had visited the old house after I had moved out. I still remembered the creaky floorboards, the garden we had planted as kids, the tree where Dad used to teach me to throw a baseball. And now it was gone, sold to someone else. I took a deep breath, pushing my way into the conversation. I think we need to stop pretending like this isn't a huge problem. I could feel the tension in the air, my anger barely contained. You should have told me, Hannah. You should have consulted me. Hannah looked at me, her face unreadable, but I could see the cracks in her facade. James, this isn't about you. It's about what's best for everyone. No, I said sharply, it's about you making a decision that affects all of us, and acting like you could just do that. There was a long silence before Dad, usually a man of few words, spoke up. We've been meaning to talk about it, James. It wasn't just Hannah's decision. He paused, as if the weight of the words he had just spoken were too much. We've had to make tough choices. But his words felt empty, hollow even. Like they were making excuses for something they knew was wrong. I left that night, my head spinning. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from Hannah. I know you're angry. But you don't know everything. Meet me at the house. I'll explain. I wasn't sure what to expect. A plea for forgiveness? Another excuse? But what I found waiting for me was far worse than anything I could have imagined. I arrived to find Hannah sitting at the kitchen table. The house, now empty, felt even colder. But there was something different about her demeanor, an odd tension that I couldn't place. James, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I didn't sell the house to just anyone. She paused, staring at her hands. I sold it to someone in our family. I blinked, confused. What? I asked. You sold it to someone in the family? Yes, she said, her voice trembling. To Mom and Dad. My heart dropped. What do you mean? They asked me to, she explained, her words coming out in a rush. They said they couldn't afford the repairs anymore and they didn't want to tell you. They didn't want you to know they were struggling. I stood there, the shock of it all crashing over me. Mom and Dad had hidden this from me? The weight of the secret they had kept was heavier than I expected. They had involved Hannah but kept me out of it entirely. I was furious but also betrayed in a way I hadn't seen coming. For the next few days I barely spoke to anyone. I couldn't wrap my head around what had happened. But then I got an idea. A dangerous, reckless idea. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about showing them the consequences of their secrecy. I had to make them feel what I was feeling. I sold part of my savings and within a week I found it. The perfect house, the one Hannah had always dreamed of. It was stunning, a mansion by our small town standards. Spacious, luxurious, and nestled in a neighborhood I knew would make her envy it. I didn't hesitate. I bought it. The day I confronted Hannah was the day everything changed. I invited her over under the pretense of talking things through, but what I showed her wasn't what she expected. You bought the house? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at the sprawling estate before her, unable to comprehend what I had done. What? Why would you do this? Because I wanted to show you, I said, standing tall. How it feels when someone takes everything from you. How it feels when you're left in the dark. You sold the house without thinking of anyone but yourself, so I thought you'd appreciate the experience of losing something you love. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a mix of anger and desperation filling her gaze. James, this isn't you. This is crazy. I shrugged. Maybe it's exactly who I am now. The night of her eviction, I watched from a distance as she packed her things, devastated. I knew this wasn't the end of it. This would tear us all apart. But something in me needed this to know that I had control over something, anything. I didn't expect it to feel so hollow. Months passed and I had moved on more or less. The house was beautiful, but I found no joy in it. Hannah barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was always cold, measured. But what really shook me was when Mom and Dad finally confessed. We didn't want you to know, Dad said one day, his voice regretful. We've been struggling financially for years. We thought it would hurt you to see us fail. I stood there stunned. So you let me believe it was Hannah's decision all along? We didn't want to burden you, James, Mom said, tears in her eyes. We thought you had enough on your plate with your own life. I realized then that I hadn't been the only one carrying the weight of betrayal. Hannah had been a pawn in their scheme just like I had been. In the end, I realized that the family I knew had fractured long before the house was ever sold. We were all broken, each of us hiding something. In the house. It was just the tipping point. But the real lesson? No matter how much we try to control our pain, sometimes the only way to heal is to stop pretending the damage doesn't exist. The house was gone. The family was broken. But I was left with one truth: I couldn't keep running from the past. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to build something. No. Something real. Without all the lies.